It was the hour before the gods awake. Across the path of the divine event, the huge foreboding mind of night, alone in her unlit temple of eternity, lay stretched immobile upon silence marsh. Almost one felt opaque, impenetrable, in the somber symbol of her eyeless muse, the abyss of the unbodied infinite, a fathomless zero occupies the world.
Okay, good morning. So we begin again. Savitri this week. So before beginning, we'll read through the canto, first canto. But before we do that, I just want to uh, bring your attention to something as we read through it. So I'm going to read a little, just a very short passage from this book that I wrote, Reflections on Passages in Savitri. And the first chapter is about this opening passage, the first several pages. And introducing that, I say, regarding the form of the opening passage, a well-known commentator on the poem, M.V. Nadkarni, notes that the passage describes the dawn in several phases, each phase of which is illustrated in about 30 lines. Okay, so this demarcation of the passage provides a useful and interesting structure for elucidating our understanding of its meaning. So as we read through, I'm going to turn to the next reader after these 30 lines or so. So each reader will be reading a different phase of this dawn as it takes place. This book is by me, Reflections on Passages in Savitri. So each chapter is on a different passage, and the first one is on this opening passage. So again, just kind of be mindful of the shift that takes place after each person reads. So we can begin here. Yeah, so we're beginning book 1. Yeah. You want to read the author's note here? Um, yeah, we could read the author's note. Go ahead.
Author's note by Shiyavando. The tale of Satyavan and Savitri is recited in the Mahabharata as a story of conjugal love conquering death. But this legend is, as shown by many features of human tale, one of the many symbolic myths of the Vedic cycle. Satyavan is the soul carrying the divine truth of being within itself, but descended into the grip of death and ignorance. Savitri is the divine bird, daughter of the sun, goddess of the supreme truth, who comes down and is born to save. Ashwapati, the lord of the horse, her human father, is the lord of tapasya, the concentrated energy of spiritual endeavor that helps us to rise from the mortal to the immortal planes. Sena, lord of the shining hosts, father of Satyavan, is the divine mind here fallen blind, losing its celestial kingdom of vision, and through that lost its kingdom of glory. Still, this is not a mere allegory. The characters are not personalized qualities, but incarnations or emanations of living and conscious forces with whom we can enter into concrete touch, and they take human bodies in order to help man and show him the way from his mortal state to a divine consciousness and immortal life.
Thank you. So let's continue then with the first opening passage.
Canto 1, Symbol Dawn. It was the hour before the gods awake across the path of the divine event. The hues foreboding minds of night alone in her unlit temple of eternity. Lay stressed, immobile upon silence marge, almost unfelt, opaque, impenetrable in the sombre symbol of her eyeless muse. The abysm of the unbodied infinite, a fathomless zero, occupied the world. A power of fallen boundless self awake between the first and the last nothingness, recalling the tenebrous womb from which it came, turned from the insoluble mystery of birth and the tardy processes of mortality, and longs to reach its end in vacant naught, as in a dark beginning of all things, a mute, featureless semblance of the unknown, repeating forever the unconscious act, prolonging forever the unseen will. Cradle the cosmic drowse of ignorant force, whose moved creative slumber kindles the suns and carries our lives in its somnambulist world. Earthward, the vain, enormous trance of space, its formless stupor, without mind or life, a shadow spinning through a soulless void, thrown back once more into unthinking dreams, earth-wheeled, abandoned in the hollow gulfs, forgetful of her spirit and her fate. The impassive skies are neutral, empty, still.
Thank you, Scott. So, Margaret? Now notice the shift.
Something in the inscrutable darkness stirred. A nameless movement, an unsought idea, insistent, dissatisfied, without an aim. Something that wished but knew not how to be, teased the inconscient to wake ignorance. A throe that came and left a quivering trace, gave room for an old tired want unfilled, at peace in its subconscious moonless cave, to raise its head and look for absent light, straining closed eyes of vanished memory, like one who searches for a bygone self and only meets the corpse of his desire. It was as though even in this nought's profound, even in this ultimate dissolution's core, there lurked an unremembering entity, survivor of a slain and buried past, condemned to resume the effort and the pain, reviving in another frustrate world. An unshaped consciousness desired light, and a blank prescience yearned towards distant change. As if a childlike finger laid on a cheek, reminded of the endless need in things, the heedless mother of the universe, an infant longing clutched the sombre vast. Insensible somewhere a breach began, a long lone line of hesitating youth, like a vague smile tempting a desert heart, troubled the far rim of life's obscure sleep.
Thank you.
Arrived from the other side of boundlessness, an eye of deity peered through the dumb deeps. I scoot in a reconnaissance from the sun. It seemed amid a heavy cosmic rest, the torpor of a sick and weary world, to seek for spirit, soul, and desolate, to failing to recollect forgotten bliss, intervening in a midless universe. Its message creep through the reluctant hush, calling the adventure of consciousness and joy, and conquering nature's disillusioned breast, compelled renewed consent and see and feel. A truth was sown in the unsounded void. A sense was born within the darkness depths. A memory quivered in the heart of time, as if a soul long dead were moved to live, but the oblivion that succeeds the fall had blotted the crowded tablets of the past. And all that was destroyed must be rebuilt, and old experience labored out once more. All can be done if the God touches there. A hope stole in that hardly dared to be, amid the night's forlorn indifference, as if solicited in an alien world with timid and hazardous in instinct grace, orphaned and driven out to seek a home, an errant marvel with no place to live, into a far off nook of heaven, through there came a slow miraculous gestures, dim appeal, the persistent thrill of a transfiguring touch, persuade the inert black quietude, and beauty and wonder disturbed the fields of God.
Thank you.
A wandering hand of pale enchanted light that glowed along a fading moment's brink, fixed with gold panel and opalescent hinge, a gate of dreams ajar on mystery's verge. One loosened corner windowing hidden things forced the world's blind immensity to sight. The darkness failed and slipped like a falling cloak, from the reclining body of a god. Then through the pallid rift that seemed at first hardly enough for a trickle from the suns, outpoured the revelation and the flame. The brief perpetual sign recurred above. A glamour from unreached transcendencies, iridescent with the glory of the unseen, a message from the unknown immortal light, a blaze upon creation's quivering edge. Dawn built her aura of magnificent hues and buried its seat of grandeur in the hours. An instant's visitor, the Godhead shone. On life's thin border, a wilder vision stood and bent over earth's pondering forehead curve. Interpreting a recondite beauty and bliss in color's hieroglyphs of mystic sense, it wrote the lines of a significant myth, telling of a greatness of spiritual dawns, a brilliant code penned with the sky for page.
Thank you.
Almost that day the Epiphany was disclosed, of which our thoughts and hopes are signal flares. A lonely splendor from the invisible goal almost was flung on the opaque inane. Once more, a tread perturbed the vacant vasts. Infinity center, a face of rapturous calm, parted the eternal lids that open heaven. A form from beatitude seemed to near. Ambassadress twixt eternity and change, the omniscient goddess leaned across the breadths that robbed the fated journeyings of the stars and saw the spaces ready for her feet. Once she half looked behind for her veiled son, then, thoughtful, went to her immortal work. Earth felt the imperishable's passage close. The waking ear of nature heard her steps, and whiteness turned to her its limitless eye, and scattered on sealed depths, her luminous smile kindled to fire the silence of the worlds. All grew a consecration and a light. Air was a vibrant link between earth and heaven. The white-winged hymn of a great priestly wind arose and failed upon the altar hills. The high boughs prayed in a revealing sky. Here, where our half-lit ignorance skirts the gulfs on the dumb bosom of the ambiguous earth, here, where one knows not even the step in front, and truth has her throne on the shadowy back of doubt, on this anguished and precarious field of toil, outspread beneath some large indifferent gaze, impartial witness of our joy and bale, our prostrate soil bore the awakening way. Here too the vision and prophetic gleam lit into miracles, common meaningless shades.
Okay, thank you. Let's just pause there and continue.
Then the divide flutters, spent, withdrew, unwanted, fading from the mortal's range. A sacred yearning lingered in its trace, the worship of a presence and a power too perfect to be held by death-bound hearts, the prescience of a marvelous birth to come. Only a little the godlight can stay. Spiritual beauty illumining human sight, lines with its passion and mystery, matters masks, and squanders eternity on a beat of time. As when a soul draws near the seal of birth, adjoining mortal time to timelessness, a spark of deity lost in matter's crypt, its lustres vanishes in the inconscient flames. That transitory glow of the excess of beauty, natural to God-kind, could not uphold its claim on time-born eyes. Too mystic rule for space tenancy, her body of glory was expunged from heaven. The rarity and wonder lived no more. There was the common light of earthly day, affranchised from the respite of fatigue. Once more, the rumor of the speed of life pursued the cycles of her blinded quest. All sprang to their unvarying daily acts. The thousand peoples of the soil and tree obeyed the unforeseen instant urge, and leader here with his uncertain mind, alone who stares at the future's covered face, man lifted up the burden of his fate.
Thank you. So we've gone through the 6 phases of the dawn, and these last lines on this page 6 are kind of a transition to the next section. So we'll continue.
And Savitri too woke among these tribes that hastened to join the brilliant summoner's chant, and, lured by the beauty of apparent ways, acclaimed their portion of ephemeral joy. Akin to the entered eternity whence she came, sorry, no part she took in this small happiness. A mighty stranger in the human field, the embodied guest within made no response. The call that wakes the leap of human mind, its checkered eager motion of pursuit, its fluttering hued illusion of desire, visited her heart like a sweet alien note. Time's message of brief light was not for her. In her there was the anguish of the gods, imprisoned in our transient human mold, the deathless conquered by the death of things. A vaster nature's joy had once been hers, but long could keep not its gold heavenly hue, or stand upon this brittle earthly base. A narrow movement on time's deep abysm, life's fragile littleness denied the power, the proud and conscious wideness and the bliss she had brought with her into the human form, the calm delight that weds one soul to all, the key to the flaming doors of ecstasy. Earth's grain that needs the sap of pleasure and tears rejected the undying rapture's boon. Offered to the daughter of infinity, her passion flower of love and doom she gave.
Thank you.
In vain now seemed the splendid sacrifice, a prodigal of her rich divinity. Herself and all she had lent to men, hoping her greater being to implant, and in their bodies lives alchematize, that heaven might native grow on mortal soil. Hard is it to persuade the earth nature's change. Mortality bears ill the eternal touch. It fears the pure divine intolerance of that assault of ether and of fire. It murmurs at its sorrowless happiness, almost with hate, repels the light it brings. It trembles at its naked power of truth and the might and sweetness of its absolute voice, inflicting on the height the abysmal laws. It sallies with its mire heaven's messengers. Its thrones of fallen natures are the defense. It turns against the Saviour hands of grace. It makes the sons of God with death and pain, a glory of lightning traversing the earth's sin, their sun thoughts fading, darkened by ignorant minds, their work betrayed, their good to evil turned. They cross their payment for the crown they gave. Only they leave behind a splendid name. A fire has come and touched man's heart and gone. A few have caught flame and risen to greater light.
Thank you. No, go. Too unlike the world she came to help and save, her greatness weighed upon its ignorant breast, and from its dim chasms welled a dire return, a portion of its sorrow, struggle, fall. To live with grief, to confront death on her road, the mortal's lot became the immortal's share. Thus, trapped in the gin of earthly destinies, awaiting her ordeal's hour abode, overcast from her inborn felicity, accepting life's obscure terrestrial robe, hiding herself even from those she loved. The Godhead, greater by a human fate, a dark foreknowledge separated her from all of whom she was the star and stay, too great to impart the peril and the pain. In her torn depths she kept the grief to come, as one who, watching over men left blind, takes up the load of an unwitting race, harboring a foe whom with her heart she must feed. Unknown her act, unknown the doom she faced, unhelped she must foresee and dread and dare. The long foreknown and fatal morn was here, bringing a noon that seemed like every noon. For nature walks upon her mighty way, unheeding when she breaks a soul, a life, leaving her slain behind she travels on. Man only marks and God's all-seeing eyes, even in this moment of her soul's despair, in its grim rendezvous with death and fear, no cry broke from her lips, no call for aid. She told the secret of her woe to none. Calm was her face, and courage kept her mute. Thank you.
Yet only her outward self suffered and strove. Even her humanity was half divine. Her spirit opened to the spirit in all. Her nature felt on nature as its own. Apart, living within, all lives she bore. Aloof, she carried in herself the world. Her dread was one with a great cosmic dread. Her strength was founded on the cosmic mights. The universal mother's love was hers. Against the evil at life's afflicted roots, her own calamity its private sign. Of her pangs she made a mystic poignant sword, a solitary mind, a world-wide heart. To the lone immortals' unshared work she rose. At first life grieved not in her burdened breast, on the lap of earth's original somnolence, inert, released into forgetfulness, prone it reposed, unconscious on mind's verge, abused and tranquil, like the stone and star. In a deep cleft of silence twixt two realms, she lay remote from grief, unsawn by care, nothing recalling of the sorrow here. Then, slow faint remembrance, shadow-like moved, and signing she laid her hand upon her bosom, and recognized the close and lingering ache, deep, quiet, old, made natural to its place, but knew not why it was there, nor whence it came. The power that kindled's mind was still withdrawn. Heavy, unwilling, were life's servitors, like workers with no wages of delight. Sullen, the torch of sense refused to burn. The unassisted brain found not its past. Only awake earth's nature held the frame.
Thank you.
But now she started, her life shared the cosmic load. At the sounds of her body's voiceless call, her strong, far-wagging spirit traveled back to the yoke of ignorance and fate, back to the labor and stress of mortal days, lighting a pathway through strange symbol dreams, across the ebbing of the seas of sleep. Her house of nature felt an unseen sway, illuminate swiftly where life's darkness rooms, and memory's seasons opened on the hours, and the tired feet of troops approached her doors. All came back to her, earth and love and doom. The ancient disputants encircled her like giant figures wrestling in the night. The godheads from the dim inconsciousness born awoke the struggle and pang divine, and in the shadow of her flaming heart, at the sombre center of the dire debate, a guardian of unconsoled abyss, entering the long agony of the globe, a stone still figure of hide and godlike pain, stared into space with fixed, regardless eyes that saw grief's timeless deeps but not life's goal. Afflicted by his harsh divinity, bound to his throne, he waited unappeased to daily oblation of her unwept tears, all the fierce question of man's hours relieved, the sacrifice of suffering and desire earth offers to the immortal ecstasy. Began again vanity the eternal hand. Awake, she endured the moment's serried march, and looked on the green smiling dangerous world, and heard the ignorant cry of living things. Amid the trivial sounds, the unchanging scene, her soul arose, confronting time and fate. Immobile in herself, she gathered force. This was the day when Satan must die. Satan must die.
Thank you. So we go back to the beginning. Now, maybe I'll just read a little bit more from this chapter 1 of Reflections on Passages in Savitri. So, before beginning with our examination of the passage, we should mention that Sri Aurobindo did not invent this symbol of the dawn. He discovered its use already in the ancient Rig Veda. In his translation and interpretation of a particular passage in the Secret of the Veda, he writes the following: "This is the straightforward and natural sense of the hymn, and its intention is not difficult to follow if we remember the main ideas and images of the Vedic doctrine. The night is clearly the image of an inner darkness. By the coming of the dawn, the truths are won out of the nights. This is the rising of the sun, which was lost in the obscurity, the familiar figure of the lost sun recovered by the gods and the Angiras rishis, the sun of truth, and it now shoots out its tongue of fire towards the golden light. For Hiranya, gold, is the concrete symbol of the higher light, the gold of the truth. And it is this treasure, not golden coin, for which the Vedic rishis pray to the gods." And then I comment, as here the golden light is mentioned, we may note that for Sri Aurobindo, the golden light represents the light of the supramental truth. For example, in one of his letters on yoga, he writes, "The golden light is the light of the divine truth, which comes out from the supramental sunlight and, modified according to the level it crosses, creates the ranges from overmind to higher mind." And then further down in the passage from the Secret of the Veda, Sri Aurobindo concludes, "We shall see that not only in this hymn, but everywhere, dawn comes as a bringer of the truth, is herself the outshining of the truth. She is the divine dawn, and the physical dawning is only her shadow and symbol in the material universe." And then I'll just add one more thing from the kind of opening of the chapter. I say the opening of the poem is sometimes considered one of the most difficult parts to understand, as here we're introduced to an unusual mystical poetry and a multi-leveled symbol of the dawn. At one level, it is a description of the dawn on the day in which the main action of the poem occurs. But the outer significance of the physical dawn is only the most superficial sense of the dawn described here. It also represents the dawning of light in the darkness at the origin of the physical universe. Next, the periodic openings of our darkened material consciousness to higher levels of consciousness, and eventually to the spiritual light and its influence. And next, the advent of the divine consciousness in the world through the avatar, the incarnation of the divine being. And finally, the advent of a new stage in the evolution of consciousness on earth, the advent of a supramental consciousness and a higher divine being embodied on earth. Some of these deeper significances are only hinted at in this opening passage, but all are further developed in later parts of the poem. Okay. So now let's again begin with the opening passage to start.
It was the hour before the gods awake. Across the path of the divine event, the huge foreboding mind of night, alone in her temple of eternity, lay stretched immobile upon silence marge. Almost one felt opaque, impenetrable, in the somber symbol of her eyeless muse, the abysm of the unbodied infinite. A fathomless zero occupied the world, a power of fallen boundless self awake between the first and the last nothingness, recalling the tenebrous womb from which it came, turned from the insoluble mystery of birth and the tardy process of mortality, and longed to reach its end in vacant naught. As in a dark beginning of all things, a mute, featureless semblance of the unknown, repeating forever the unconscious act, prolonging forever the unseeing will, cradled the cosmic drowse of ignorant force, whose moved creative slumber kindles the suns and carries our lives in its somnambulist whirl. Athwart the vain enormous trance of space, its formless stupor without mind or life, a shadow spinning through a soulless void, thrown back once more into unthinking dreams. Earth wheeled, abandoned in the hollow gulfs, forgetful of her spirit and her fate. The impassive skies were neutral, empty, still.
Thank you. We'll pause there. So again, we see that now this is the first of 6 phases of the dawn that are described in this opening section. And here, there's mainly darkness, right? So it's still the hour before the gods awake. And now this opening line suggests that it's the hour of a recurring kind of event. It's one of a recurring event. So it was, and then at the end we have gods awake. So the gods awake periodically every day, but this was one particular day. So that's the past tense of was here. So it was the hour before the gods awake. And then also several commentators have noted that this represents the hour before the pujaris ring the temple bells in the early morning, which I think occurs around 4 o'clock in the morning, typically. So this is kind of the hour between like 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning. And the idea is that the temple bells are rung in order to wake the gods who kind of sleep during the night, when the night kind of takes over. Yeah, the gods, all the gods, and right. Well, you're differentiating temple gods from other gods, but they're all gods, right? Temple gods are not different from other gods. They're just gods. Existence of time. Yeah, that could be like a deeper significance of the passage, because we get the sense as we go through these opening lines that one of the meanings of this suggests the beginning of the material universe, of the physical universe. So the beginning of time, even. Hmm. 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 So, in one sense, you're suggesting that the gods represent light of consciousness, or a greater light, and this is before that comes. Yeah, okay, that's okay. Yeah, well, there are different layers of meaning. So we can, we don't have to say it's only this or only that, right? We can kind of take in, I think, the whole idea. That was why I read this little passage from explaining that some of the different layers of meaning of this dawn. So they represent all of these things. And the last one I mentioned was this opening of a new age, of the supramental light. So it seems like that's the one that you're kind of emphasizing, perhaps. It does, I think, represent that, but it represents it on a number of different levels. So there was one thing I wanted to read from Shraddhavan. About this opening passage, also she says, okay, we see in the next lines, across the path of the divine event, the huge foreboding mind of night, alone, in her unlit temple of eternity, lay stretched immobile upon silence marge. So we're introduced in the very next line to this, let's say, advent of the gods or of the light, of the dawn. There is the night that's laying stretched across the path. And that night here is emphasized in this kind of opening 30 lines, because it's still that hour before the gods are awaking, and so this night is dominant here. And then let's just read Shraddhavan's passage. We could say that the struggle between two powers, the dark, foreboding mind of night, which longs for everything to dissolve again into nothingness and emptiness, and the power of the dawn, Savitri, who brings the new light and the eventual triumph of a higher light that can transform even the mind of night, is the underlying theme of the whole of this marvelous poem, which begins with the mind of night resisting the coming of the divine event, the adventure of consciousness and joy, and which ends with night transformed. Yeah, I'm suggesting that's one of the layers of the symbolism of the dawn. We see, I think, that emphasized in some of the lines, that particular significance, the opening of the universe, beginning of the universe, beginning of time, as you said. In some lines, for example, as in a dark beginning of all things. So, and in that line in particular, Sri Aurobindo is kind of suggesting as if this dawn was almost like that very beginning of the universe. But he brings in that, that idea into it. A mute, featureless semblance of the unknown. And that line, that kind of a semblance is a kind of a appearance of, a representation of, and usually a semblance is maybe not always such a good representation. It's a kind of resemblance, but not, quite it. So this mute, featureless suggests it's a kind of resemblance of the unknown, but it's a kind of a dark, silent resemblance of the unknown, kind of a figure of it. And then repeating forever the unconscious act. So it's kind of like material force is unconscious, and it just continues repeating. It just, the energy revolves around the proton of the atom. It's just continuous repeating motion, but unconscious. Prolonging forever the unseeing will, cradled the cosmic drowse of ignorant force, whose moved creative slumber kindles the suns. Drowses, sleepy. So we see this idea, kindles the suns. This kind of movement of energy lights the suns. Potential force coming into manifestation in the brings the suns into being. So that also all of this kind of suggests in a way that beginning of the physical universe, the lighting of the stars, which occurs, I guess, a few milliseconds after, the Big Bang or something. Prolonging forever the unseeing will. Hmm. Hmm. It's cradling the, what do you say? Cradle the cosmic drowse of ignorant force. So there's just this movement of force. And then that movement kindles the suns. Kindles the suns, it means it lights up, it manifests in the sun, in the stars, let's say. Yeah, in the scientific theory, right, even before the stars, there is some moments, very short, before the stars come into being. And there's just some kind of force there. It lights, you light a fire, you kindle a fire. Yeah. But kindle is associated with fire. You kindle a fire by, putting some small, kindle with a match or with some kindling wood, which are very small sticks, and then you get the fire going. Right? But he's imaging a multi-layered dawn. Multi-layered in the sense of different meanings, different levels. of a spiritual light emerging, of a physical universe emerging, of the day on which Satyavan must die. All of these meanings are there. Yeah, the power of fallen, boundless self. So it suggests that this darkness is a result of a fall of a greater self, the divine self, a divine being has fallen into unconsciousness. Right. Before, in the beginning, there was a boundless self. It's fallen. It's fallen into unconsciousness. And it's somewhere between the first and the last nothingness. Perhaps the nothingness of inconscience and the nothingness of superconscience. Yeah. Yeah, we can take it in that way also. Oh. So, okay, there is a suggestion of the yugas. And in the beginning of a yuga, kind of comes out of nothingness. And it disappears back into nothingness at the end of the yuga. And then another yuga proceeds, another age. Oh, okay. Okay, let's not have too much crosstalk because there's other people listening on YouTube that can't hear what you're saying. But the idea is that he's speaking of the yugas and the details of the different yugas and how they manifest. But I don't think we need to go into that. What else do we want to bring out here? We see that at the very end of this passage, the impassive skies were neutral, empty, still.
What does athwart mean?
Athwart means across and kind of blocking.
Across a line?
Across a path. And in that second line, as you bring it up, across the path of the divine event. And for me also that event there carries, because it's capitalized, suggests to me well, he even says divine event. But to me, it kind of suggests the possibility, at least, of avatar or of some supramental manifestation, of a divine manifestation. So it's very subtle. He doesn't bring it out, but just very suggestively event. Exactly what is this event? He doesn't say exactly, precisely what it means, but it's a suggestive term. We see it's a divine event. It could be any of these different meanings. It could also just be the outbreak of spiritual light, of divine light, related to mother. Mm. So the mother gives birth to what? The universe, to everything. She gives birth. That giving birth of the divine mother to everything could be this divine event. Yeah. Yeah, this boundless self awake. The process of birth, yeah, of all of this, of the universe, of the divine light, of the culmination, we could say also of the creation. Like we're kind of midway through this evolutionary advance. And at some point, there is this efflorescence of the divine truth on earth in the, let's say, supramental creation. In one sense, that also is the divine event that is occurring. But we get to the end of this portion, but still everything is silent, neutral, empty, still. We haven't really woken up. We're still at that hour before the gods awake. So let's see what happens next. We read the next. I don't know where we are.
Then something in the inscrutable darkness stirred. A nameless movement, an unthought idea, insistent, dissatisfied, without an aim. Something that wished but knew not how to be, teased the inconscient to wake ignorance. A throw that came and left a quivering trace gave room for an old, tired want unfilled. At peace in its subconscious moonless cave, to raise its head and look for absent light, straining closed eyes of vanished memory, like one who searches for a bygone self and only meets the corpse of his desire. It was as though even in this note's profound, even in this ultimate dissolution's core, there lurked an unremembering entity, survivor of a slain and buried past, condemned to resume the effort and the pang, reviving in another frustrate world. An unshaped consciousness desired light, and the blank prescience yearned towards distant change. As if a childlike finger laid on a cheek reminded of the endless need in things, the heedless mother of the universe, an infant longing clutched the somber vast. Insensibly, somewhere a breach began, a long, lone line of hesitating hue, like a vague smile tempting a desert heart, troubled the far rim of life's obscure sleep.
Thank you. We see in this next phase that there is some kind of stirring of consciousness in this original darkness, inconscience, we could say. He uses these kind of philosophical terms, tease the inconscient to wake ignorance. So we can kind of take that first phase as inconscience. There's just this kind of physical force, perhaps, movement. But here, there's a kind of awakening of consciousness in this second phase. A nameless movement, an unthought idea. It's still kind of unconscious, not really very self-aware, but something slowly waking up in this original inconscience. Something that wished but knew not how to be. A throw that came and left a quivering trace. It's kind of a vibration, a movement occurring in that original darkness and silence. Gave room for an old, tired want unfilled, at peace in its subconscient moonless cave, to raise its head and look for absent light. As if some kind of very vague desire wakes up in that inconscience, something that wants something, but it doesn't really know what. But there's some kind of a desire waking up for something more, maybe for light. Old. Yeah. So perhaps it's old because it was recurring from another cycle, or it's just been there for a long, long time, but wasn't able to really reach out and express itself. This time, right? It's kind of emerging out of this timelessness. Is it psychic? Well, I don't know that we could call it psychic yet. It's something subconscious. It's just a very vague kind of stirring of something, of consciousness. Yeah, it could be that it recurred before, as Helmut said, or it could be that it was just there for a long, long time in the inconscient, unexpressed. Pointed out to us that on page 135, at the beginning of the page, there is in nations began her mighty task. In ignorance, she pursued the unfinished work. For knowledge grows but moves not with the place. So she made a parallel. Yeah, there on page 135, they're describing that same kind of inconscient level and then the ignorance level in which there's a kind of a movement of consciousness, an awakening of consciousness. So that's here described in that. But these are very beginning stirrings in the inconscience. Okay, was before. So now it raises its head and looks for absent light, straining closed eyes of vanished memory. That also suggests perhaps there was something there before. Like one who searches for a bygone self and only meets the corpse of his desire. It's kind of an analogy here, somewhat, I don't know, ironic in a way, like where we might want to think back to something to something that we were earlier in our lives, but we only come up with something that we desire, not really the fact or something. An image of ourselves, like, yeah. And then it describes it more clearly in these next lines. Even in this ultimate dissolution's core, there lurked an unremembering entity, survivor of a slain and buried past, condemned to resume the effort and the pang, reviving in another frustrate world. So it suggests these cycles, that it's waking up again, not for the first time, but really unable to clearly recall what it had been before, its self, its awakened self. And then there's a beautiful image, as if a childlike finger laid on a cheek, reminded of the endless need in things, the heedless mother of the universe. So it's as if a mother is holding an infant. Mother of the universe is holding an infant, and it reaches up and touches her cheek and reminds her of the endless need in things. An infant longing clutched the somber vast. So it's as if something wakes up in the mother's arms, reminds her of what more must be done. Mm.
Of the child which clutched the vast.
And then in the last lines, we get a little image of the first breaking of the dawn. Insensibly, meaning still not quite consciously, somewhere a breach began. A breach is a kind of an opening. A long, lone line of hesitating youth. That first glimmer of the dawn over the horizon, just a very thin line of light coming. Yes, it's a very musical line. A long, lone line of hesitating hue. Like a vague smile tempting a desert heart. And then a beautiful simile comparing it to a vague smile. Just kind of tempting a heart that is forlorn, tempting it with some kind of happiness or something light. Troubled the far rim of life's obscure sleep. So this little thin line of hesitating color, hesitating hue, just giving a little bit of trouble on the edge of the darkness. Yeah, again, it suggests this kind of awakening of consciousness in the inconscient, from the inconscient. It's a blank prescience. It's blank. It's almost hardly anything, hardly aware, hardly awake. But it has a kind of a prescience, a kind of a foreknowledge, a suggestion that something more is coming, a greater light, but it's still in the distance. It's a change far off, yet still in the distance. So again, it emphasizes that very beginning of things. Mm. Yeah, it describes this kind of beginning movement, but looking towards something more. We've had that with the sense of desire kind of coming, and old tired want unfilled. straining closed eyes, a vanished memory. You see just how the very primordial beginnings of light and consciousness coming. So I think we stop there now for today.
An unshaped consciousness desired light, and blank presence yearned towards distant change, as if a childlike finger laid on a cheek, reminded of the endless need in things, the heedless mother of the universe, an infant longing clutched the somber vast.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.